In today's video, we'll be explaining one of the most complex and fascinating runs in the history of Dead Cells speedrunning. Between the glitches, frame-perfect movements, and immaculate RNG luck, this run truly is legendary. If you enjoy this video, please do consider subscribing. I plan on unpacking a bunch more roguelike speedruns, and I really want to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Additionally, be sure to check out the runner behind this insane world record, Vord, as well as the veteran Dead Cells player who helped me research this game as a whole, R30 Hedron. Now, on with the video.
Hold on a minute before we start this video. So, the run in this video is not actually the world record anymore, but it was while I was writing the script, and it's been a very long time since I've uploaded, and that's because it took me so long to write the script. And I'm not going to rewrite it for the new world record, because I know by the time I rewrite it for the new world record, that one's probably going to be beaten, and it's just like a long chain of rewriting scripts as the world record keeps getting beaten. So I'm just going to talk about this record, Vord's 8:59 fresh file run, because I still think it's a really good, if not one of the best showcases of Dead Cells speedrunning as a whole, and I know it's still going to entertain you. And if it doesn't entertain you, just let me know in the comments why, because I'm really proud of this video, and I think it's gonna do well. So that's it. TLDR, the run is not the world record, but it's still really great. All right, thank you.
Dead Cells is a side-scroller roguelike in which the player navigates 6 core stages and 3 boss battles, all the while getting more powerful by collecting scrolls, weapons, and items. Speedrunning this game is unique in the sense that the game seems to encourage players to do so, or at the very least, it began to do so after update 2.1, in which an RTA timer was added into the game. Speedrunning roguelikes in general can be difficult, as the game uses difficulty as a boundary to prevent you from progressing without acquiring upgrades and items. While other games tend to use definitive walls to prevent you from moving through the game without first completing certain tasks, a lot of roguelikes will assume you won't be able to beat the game on your first attempt, and when they're dealing with the vast majority of their player bases, they're usually right. Thus, lots of roguelikes could theoretically be beaten in less than an hour, and Dead Cells is no exception to this, as it throws the player into a world full of enemies who could never be beaten on your first try. However, with enough practice and dedication, a handful of speedrunners have managed to beat the game on a given save state's very first run. This type of speedrun is known as a fresh file speedrun. Some other things to note about fresh file runs is that they're divided into 4 categories: unseeded before update 2.1, seeded before update 2.1, unseeded after update 2.1, and seeded after update 2.1. When a run is seeded, the runner has entered in a unique seed to purposefully make the world generation for their run predetermined. Runs that are randomized and whose world generation is completely random are unseeded runs. This is a concept that may be familiar to those who either run or watch Minecraft speedruns, as you can choose to run in worlds that are predetermined or randomized. The other distinction between fresh file runs, however, is update 2.1, which, like I mentioned earlier, is the update that introduced the RTA timer. There are some other changes as well, of course, like the content in the game and the loading times, which make the runs themselves different from each other. In this video, we're going to be explaining the world record for fresh file post 2.1 unseeded. Time starts when the player gains the ability to move and ends when the credits are reached. The world record for this category is 8 minutes, 59 seconds, and 955 milliseconds. The holder of this record? A legendary runner by the name of Vord. Everyone that I've talked to in the Dead Cells community has unanimously agreed on one thing: Vord is godlike at Dead Cells. As of the writing of this video, Vord holds the world record for fresh file pre and post 2.1 unseeded, post 2.1 seeded, 5 BC, 0 to 5 BC glitchless, all bosses, cursed sword glitchless, reverse rune order, and both boss rush modes. You may not know what most of those records are, and that's okay. The point is, Vord is a very prolific runner of Dead Cells, and the community respects them a lot. Like most of Vord's record-holding runs, the fresh-filed post 2.1 unseeded record, which, by the way, is just an absurd thing for me to keep saying over and over, so I'm just going to say fresh file from now on. So just know that for the rest of the video, when I say fresh file, I'm talking about fresh file post 2.1 unseeded. Okay, moving on. Vord's fresh file record is very optimized both in terms of gameplay and RNG. At the very beginning of the run, we can see that Vord plays the game in traditional Chinese, which, unlike most speedruns, does not affect dialogue duration. In a lot of speedruns, speedrunners will switch the language of their game to a different language, often traditional Chinese, to reduce the amount of characters that appear in unskippable dialogue. However, none of the cutscenes with dialogue in Dead Cells are unskippable, thus someone playing the game in, like, Pig Latin or something would get past all the cutscenes just as quick as someone playing the game in traditional Chinese. However, traditional Chinese does offer one small change later on, which we'll cover once we get there. For now, just know that Dead Cells is one of the few games where traditional Chinese isn't used to skip dialogue. Moving through the first area, Vord's goal is simple. Get to the next area as fast as possible. Normally while playing Dead Cells, you would want to get as many scrolls as possible to maximize your health and damage, but of course, in a speedrun, there's no time for that. Obviously having a higher damage output means you can breeze through bosses quicker, and having a higher HP would mean your run is safer, but this isn't worth the trade-off of what could potentially be full minutes wasted trying to find all the scrolls. Thus, Vord is going the path they think would be the fastest way to the next area, and if they run into any scrolls along the way, then that's considered good RNG. 16 seconds into the run, Vord encounters their first stroke of good luck, getting access to a scroll that is along the exact path they are going, so they are able to boost their tactics stat. Vord continues to move forward, and then does this while jumping onto this platform. By attacking with the bow while jumping, the player character can instantly warp from directly below the platform to directly on top of it. This is because the bow attack animation replaces the climbing animation that would normally play when trying to climb up a platform like this one. This trick is called a ledge cancel, and saves only a fraction of a second when performed, but is extremely difficult to the point where even the top players have trouble doing it consistently. There's only a few frames in which the bow animation can be used to replace the climbing animation, but when it's done correctly, it saves a nice amount of time. For the rest of the first area, nothing too notable happens. 41 seconds into the run, Vord collects another scroll which they put into tactics, and 9 seconds later, they move onto the Promenade of the Condemned, or as Vord's game shows,
被谴责者的长廊.
Those symbols don't match at all. What? The great thing about speedrunning Dead Cells is that the game will reward you for completing certain areas really quickly by giving you treasure rooms in the passages between areas. By beating the first area, the prisoner's quarters, in less than 2 minutes, Vord is given a treasure room that provides the balance blade and a blueprint for the assault shield, as well as some cells. The balance blade isn't tactics, but it still is a much better weapon than the default one they had been using. Thus, this will help them progress through the boss fights much quicker. The assault shield blueprint is actually very useful later into the run, which is a really fortunate coincidence since it's one of the only blueprints that is on the same path that speedrunners take in fresh file runs. Vord doesn't actually turn in the assault shield blueprint right away. Talking to the collector would only waste valuable time when they know they'll be talking to the collector later in the run. They do, however, talk to the little guy with the backpack, Gullion, to pick up the YOLO mutation. This mutation is more of a safeguard than anything, as it gives the player a second life should they lose their first one. It's kind of ironic how the YOLO mutation allows you to live more than once. Anyways, remember how I mentioned earlier that traditional Chinese offered one small change? Well, because the language is different from English, the way the game lists mutations is also different. Thus, the order of said mutations is a lot more convenient for Vord. Not that big of a deal, but just something interesting to note. Anyways, Vord moves onto the Promenade and wastes no time running through it. Like I said earlier, going out of your way to grab scrolls is too big of a time waste, so Vord doesn't take the time to navigate the deep tunnels where said scrolls would usually be waiting. They do, however, open up their map to see if the scrolls are shallow enough in the tunnels to grab real quickly, as a single second or two is worth getting another scroll. On the second tunnel, Vord gets lucky and finds a shallow scroll, which they immediately put into brutality. Before, Vord wanted to build tactics and was increasing the attack damage of the bow, but after getting the balance blade, which is a brutality weapon, Vord begins to upgrade their brutality to strengthen the blade. It's a small hiccup, but it's worth it because of the immense damage that balance blade is capable of in fresh file runs. As a matter of fact, I've been told that balance blade is the best weapon for fresh file runs, so that's another example of the awesome RNG Vord experiences in this run. Now here's one of the coolest tricks in the run. Usually, in your first run of the Promenade, you have to collect the Vine Rune from an enemy that will allow you to progress. The Vine Rune allows you to interact with these squishy green things on the ground, turning them into vines you can climb. The game very intentionally makes it so you have to get this rune before progressing through the Promenade. However, in Vord's case, they got very lucky with the map generation, as it is almost possible to jump from this ledge over to the next area. Normally, this wouldn't be possible in the sense that the game's intended jump duration and height aren't enough for the player to reach the other ledge. However, Vord isn't a normal player. Vord runs off the ledge and jumps a few frames after they had already left the ground. The game still thinks the player is on the ground for a split second after they leave the ground, allowing Vord to jump a tad bit late for some extra distance. This is called a coyote jump, in reference to the way Wile E. Coyote hovers a bit before falling in the classic Roadrunner cartoon. This is my favorite trick personally, just because of the funny name. Anyways, Vord performs the coyote jump, but still doesn't have enough momentum to reach the ledge. Thus, they attack with the bow in mid-air, then cancel the attack with the dodge roll that, punctuated with a speed boost across this whole jump, gives Vord just enough distance to grab onto the ledge and move on without ever collecting the Vine Rune. This is obviously a pretty big skip, but as the thumbnail may have alluded, there's greater skips to come. Vord speeds through the rest of the Promenade, grabbing a Brutality Scroll, a Sinew Slicer, and then another Brutality Scroll before moving onto the passage to the ramparts at an impressive 2 minutes and 24 seconds. In the passage to the Promenade, Vord goes into a treasure room that rewards them for finishing the Promenade in less than 8 minutes. Within said treasure room, they find an even stronger balance blade, which they obviously replace their old one with. They also grab an additional 20 cells, which is just enough to unlock both the first health flask and the assault shield from the collector. Vord replaces the beginner bow with the assault shield, which immediately begins to start speeding up the run. See, the assault shield is a weapon that boosts you forward a short distance when you use it. Usually it wouldn't be enough of a boost to affect your overall movement speed, but by combining the assault shield attack with a precise dodge roll, you can extend the distance the assault shield boosts you, thus increasing movement speed by a significant amount. While the bow was useful for the ledge cancels and the vine skip, it won't be anywhere as valuable as the boosting assault shield nor the high damage balance blade, thus it just makes sense to abandon it. Vord grabs the Vengeance mutation, which increases damage dealt and decreases damage taken after an initial bit of damage is taken. Obviously runners don't plan on taking any damage, but if they do, it's nice to be safer and deal more damage as it's nearly inevitable. Vord also fills up their new health flask they picked up from the collector and finally moves onto the ramparts. The ramparts are mostly uneventful as Vord skips the majority of it while using the assault shield to boost forward, quickly grabbing 2 scrolls along the way before delving into the final tower in the ramparts to move onto the Black Bridge. It's a bit of a coin flip as to whether the next area will be all the way on the right side of the map, but if it isn't, then the player would have to explore each individual tower until they found the passage to the Black Bridge. Luckily, Vord didn't have to do this. Just another example of the amazing RNG in this run. In the passage to the Black Bridge, Vord doesn't pick up any treasure rooms, nor do they talk to the Collector. They just speed past them both and go straight to the mutations guy, where they grab the support mutation, which boosts the damage of traps. This is useful because Vord has a trap called the Sinew Slicer, which will provide additional damage for enemies that they cannot instantly breeze through with the Balance Blade, such as the Concierge in the next area waiting for them. Support mutation is the final mutation that Vord will pick up, thus leaving them with the YOLO mutation, the Vengeance mutation, and now the support mutation in total. After refilling their health flask, Vord moves onto the Black Bridge to fight the first boss of the game. The Concierge fight is pretty basic. Vord places the Sinew Slicer to start dealing some damage with it, and starts slashing away with the Balance Blade to start stacking some damage. This fight isn't entirely vanilla though. There is one cool trick players have discovered to make this fight faster and safer. Usually, the Concierge will do an attack in which it summons a red ring around itself that will deal damage if the player touches it. However, when the Concierge does the attack animation for this, you can boost into it with the Assault Shield, which staggers the Concierge for a split second. This short stagger is just enough to cancel the attack, thus players don't have to keep their distance for portions of the fight. By using this trick, Vord never has to waste time waiting for the red ring to disappear, and can keep slashing away at the Concierge throughout the entire fight, and at 4 minutes and 28 seconds into the run, they finally kill the Concierge. Considering this entire fight only takes 27 seconds, I'd say it's pretty damn efficient. Moving on to the passage to Stilt Village, Vord enters the 15-minute treasure room and picks up a stronger assault shield and some cells. Having the max amount of mutations and no new items they want to craft, they skip the majority of the passage and only stop to refill their health flask. Stilt Village is a super quick area, with Vord never stopping to fight enemies when they don't have to. There's one trick Vord uses early on when getting the first key to save a second or two, where they activate the back to start rune right below the platform it's on, which is pretty cool. This isn't the most notable trick used in Stilt Village by far though, as Vord proceeds to use another coyote jump to climb over the first door. Usually, this would require the spider rune to perform, but this case was very unique due to the map generation. Once again, godlike RNG. Because Vord still has the key that they collected earlier, they were able to skip the second key and move straight to the final door of Stilt Village. After collecting 2 more scrolls, and with a terrifying cluster of enemies behind them, Vord opened the second Stilt Village door and moved onto the passage to the clock tower. Since Vord had all of the mutations they could collect, the passage to the clock tower was pretty quick. They only paused once to upgrade their balance blade with one of the NPCs, but beyond that it was a straight shot from the entrance to the exit of the passage. The objective within the clock tower is to find a key within the 3 to 4 towers within the clock tower biome, and then use that key to unlock the door leading to the exit. Navigation through the clock tower utilizes a lot of ledge cancels like the one we discussed earlier in the very first area, because there are so many semi-transparent platforms. All of these platforms make ledge canceling an essential for speedrunning, and Vord expertly utilizes this trick to its maximum potential. Within the very first tower Vord climbs, they find the key that they are looking for, but not before grabbing 3 more scrolls along the way. They then dash to the next tower, which they know is the exit because of the fact that it doesn't have a specific notch next to it. The entrance to the tower leading to the next area is unique in this sense, so Vord knows that this tower is the exit. After narrowly avoiding all the enemies in their way and ascending to the top of the tower, Vord moves onto the passage leading to our second boss fight, the Timekeeper. Nothing interesting happens in the passage to the Timekeeper, so let's just cut to the Timekeeper. There aren't any special tricks involved in fighting this boss, but at this point, Vord's brutality level is sitting at a comfortable 11, so they can deal some massive damage with their balance blade. Sure enough, after only 23 seconds in the clock room with the Timekeeper, Vord defeats the boss and collects our second essential scroll for the run, the Lightspeed scroll. This is an item that will be very useful later, and if you saw the thumbnail or know anything about Dead Cells speedrunning, you probably have an idea of what I mean already. Vord doesn't pause to unlock the Lightspeed scroll, at least not yet. The Lightspeed scroll isn't useful until the final boss, but we'll get to that. Vord refills their health flask and moves onto High Peak Castle, the last area before the final boss. High Peak Castle is kind of a unique area whose objective is reminiscent of a Metroidvania. Within the castle are 3 colored doors that lead to mini-bosses that will drop keys when they are defeated. 2 of these keys are required to move on to the next area, so before they can move on, Vord must find 2 of the 3 keys. By the way, if you're wondering, getting the 3rd key allows you to go to a bonus room that will give you a blueprint and some items. Just some trivia. Now, the castle isn't exactly a haphazard dash to stumble upon one of these doors randomly. There's a trick for runners to identify where the exit to the area is. See, there are 2 branches in High Peak Castle. One that starts with a shop and guarantees the exit, and another that ends in a shop and does not have an exit. While Vord can't predict the location of the sub-area entrances, at least not to my knowledge, Vord can go down the path that will lead to the exit and pick up the keys along the way. This way, they won't have to backtrack to find the exit after getting the 2 keys. Vord goes through the blue sub-area, defeats the mini-boss, grabs the 1st key, then grabs another scroll before moving on to the red sub-area, where once again, they defeat the mini-boss and grab another key. Luckily for Vord, the exit to High Peak Castle ends up being super close to the exit to the red sub-area, so they quickly proceed to the passage to the final boss with only 18 seconds before the run ends. If you haven't figured it out already, Vord skips the final boss of Dead Cells, and they do it using the Lightspeed item. Now, according to R30Hedron, the community doesn't exactly know why this works, but I'm going to explain this trick as best as I can using the information I have been provided by the Dead Cells community. Basically, the Lightspeed item has 2 states. The orange state, which boosts the player forwards, and the blue state, which performs a dash in the opposite direction. If, upon entering the throne room, the player uses the Lightspeed ability while it is in the blue state while facing away from the boss fight, the player begins to move incredibly fast in the direction of the boss fight. So fast, in fact, that the character moves faster than the screen itself can move. Thus, the character reaches the place where the final boss fight would be triggered before the screen catches up to the player. Since this happens, the trigger doesn't activate, thus the player character keeps moving past the final boss all the way to the other side of the biome where the king awaits. By pressing the interact button in front of the king, Vord triggers the cutscene required to finish the run and plunges their blade straight through the corrupt king's heart. At this point, all they have to do is jump into the fountain and press the interact key one more time to end the run at a clean 8 minutes, 59 seconds, and 955 milliseconds. So that's it. This was supposed to be the part of the video where I speculate on the future of fresh file speedrunning, and I was gonna talk about how Vord's held this record for 4 months, and it's a pretty good record, and it might be unbeatable, but it was beaten very recently by Evian. But if you enjoy this video, and you want to see more Dead Cells on the channel, let me know in the comments, because I am more than happy to make a video talking about the history of fresh file speedrunning, and I do want to give Evian the credit they deserve for getting the world record. And if you enjoy this and you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. I make videos about speedrunning roguelikes all the time. Also, if you use Twitter, you can find me there. I post a lot more updates and fun roguelike anecdotes there for you to see, as well as the occasional shitpost here and there. I can't make any promises on what game or topic I'll cover in the next video, but the comments on my previous video told me Voidigo is a pretty dope game, so maybe I'll check it out. Other than that though, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.